Good evening and good morning to everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I see that we have two new participants today. Javier has two little bodhisattvas guarding him on the left and right. Here. Hi. So it's good to have these young bodhisattvas. Young bodhisattvas from our limited perspective. That they are there. Karmically tells us, they have taken their bodhisattva vows in previous lifetimes. So it's a matter of offering enough watering, enough sunlight, enough nurturing, and then those vows that have been taken will kind of wake up, reactivate. So one of the words, the word we use for like generating bodhicitta, arousing bodhicitta, there is a certain connotation that it is not something newly introduced, but it is something, it has actually both connotations of newly introduced, but it also has this other connotation of it's there, but needs to be aroused, woken up. Yeah, so. So especially for young parents, and especially in the West, but also in Asia, so for those of you who are young parents, and for those of you who are young grandparents, with regards to your grandkids, there are ways to kind of have them kind of absorb some of the Dharma without being heavy-handed about it, which we should not do. As we know, if we are forced to follow this belief that we ourselves have turned away from that. But sometimes when we turn away from that, we turn too far away from that. So that other people in our lives think, what we have found is so private, it's so personal, that they don't even dare to come close. They think, oh, that's mom's thing, or that's grandpa's thing, and it's very private. You cannot blame them to think that way, because so much of what we do is sit quietly, and so then they think, this is very private, this is very personal, So even when they want to kind of, know a little bit what's going on, they feel like to walk close to where, when, dad is doing whatever dad does privately, personally, or whatever, grandma is doing personally, privately. Oh, no. We cannot even breathe around her, she has like full concentration. That's not helpful, because then we create a barrier. We cannot pretend, to be Milarepa when we are not Milarepa. What I mean by that is, we cannot pretend that, oh, I should, when I sit down and practice, I should be like Milarepa. No matter what is happening, I will not pay attention. I will not move. Correct. That is, we are aiming for. But then you have to consider your circumstance. Again, especially, you have young kids or grandkids around. My suggestion is when you sit down to do practice, if they happen to venture into your space, rather than, always, and also I'm not saying always, so not always, even what I'm suggesting, but, at least sometimes, maybe at the beginning, more times than not, you pause. You don't think, oh, I need to enter samadhi now. Why are they coming here to disturb? Especially if your grandparents, where are their parents? Why aren't they? No, you stop and you invite them to come near. Like what? Hey, you want to hang out? You bring them and sit with you. And that's practice. That's practice. Again, not in a kind of secret agenda to convert them. But the secret agenda is not to alienate them, not to shut the door for seeds that they already have to ripen. So you say, so you attend to them. Then that session of your practice, that is part of your session of practice. Not just with kids, right? Again, we are not Milarepa. We're living at home. We're living with other people. So you sit down and you say, oh, I'm going to practice, all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky. And, you cannot help it because your samadhi is not that strong. You notice, your mom or your dad walking by, looking distressed, looking sad. All mother sentient beings now get up and say, can I, is everything okay? Would you like to sit with me? Would you like to talk about it? However, you relate to them. You don't ignore and think, oh, I need to meditate now. Distractions are only distractions, and distractions are always distractions if they are part of 8 worldly concerns. So-called distractions are not distractions if it's coming from love, compassion, and bodhicitta. Then those types of so-called distractions can be, as we like to say in Vajrayana, can be taken onto the path. Of course, you need to know your own mental state well. If it's actually an issue that everyone in the family is distressed by, then of course, in that circumstance, right, you joining into the distress, maybe not so helpful. Maybe then, yeah, in those situations, you're like, no, I should do my practice. Because you see, it's motivated by, yeah, love, compassion, and bodhicitta. Conversely, right, if everyone is distressed by a situation in the family and physically these people are around you, and you say, oh, I should attend to them, but only in a way that kind of reinforces each other's distress, then actually that action of attending to them is motivated by 8 worldly concerns. Fear of the negative column, desperately seeking the positive column. But then it's not skillful, not helpful in those circumstances. But of course, as I said, it's not like always you're like, oh, come. Yeah? Because the other side of this is, of course, the reality of we need to become more and more stable in our ability to stay and not move, to be clear and not clouded. This takes effort. This takes effort. And so there has to be commitment to strengthening that, for sure, right? Don't forget that side either. If you then get carried away by, every time you sit down to practice, you're busy wondering who you need to be helping. That also is not going to work. So realistically speaking, these 8 worldly concerns is not either they are here or they're not here. They are here in varying degrees. The first step is recognizing their presence. or not recognizing their presence. Most of the time, we don't recognize their presence. We don't recognize, they are pulling the strings of this puppet. So first we have to recognize how they're pulling our strings, we're being animated by the 8 worldly concerns. Then you have to watch, say, okay, I know that's where that's coming from, As some of you heard, you guys participate in different groups, different, I was talking about a few days ago, these compounding of circumstances, for myself, I confessed to one group, I said, I cannot stop the compounding, but I can see the compounding. What we say so much, all phenomena are compounded, all experiences are compounded. I have no power yet, or at least in what started a few days ago. I did not have the power to stop it, but I can watch it compounding. I'm not even talking about the outside conditions, but how the outside conditions trigger the compounding of a certain, feeling, a certain response within myself. It's compounding. I can watch it growing, and everything, And I said, like, not metaphorically, quite literally, I was surfing on the internet for a ticket to fly to Nepal and basically disappear for a few months. Got very close. But because I can watch it compounding, I know where that's coming from. I know that, the 8 worldly concerns are at work. And I see how I'm responding to people. Maybe some deserve my response, some don't, but I also, treat equally. But I can watch, I can see that compounding. And I will attribute it to, because I can see how it's compounding. Ultimately, I didn't act on it. Well, obviously, quite obvious. This is not a fake background, still background. I'm still, in Asheville. Then that compounded phenomena, because it's compounded, then because there is view, there is understanding, there is vision, and then that compounded experience very quickly, right? Dissolved, went away. But here's the thing. When it has gone away, then you feel good, You feel like, oh, there's just the right amount of sunlight. There's just the right temperature. Everything is right, But this response, again, if we're not careful that, the 8 worldly concerns is powering this response, and not love, compassion, and bodhicitta, then things going well now is part of the circumstances to magnify the next suffering. We have to see this, Yeah, so, starting last night, or this morning, last night, it translated even to pain in the body. Even like the feeling is over, but the pain, the body registers all the pain, right? Then this morning, you're like, oh, things are good, But if we're not careful, and if we don't have awareness, things are good, are often sets the stage for a stronger wanting to run when things are not good. So we cannot just be seeking good conditions. We seek good conditions in order to provide better circumstance for love, compassion, and bodhicitta, to replace the mental defilements. Dala thongwa jepe dra nobar jepe gek darba dan thamje gempe bardu chopra jeba tham jege su jebe ma nang khadang nyampe senjen thamje dewa dan den dunya dandre nerdu lana me bhaya Dabra zobe janju rinpoche dobra jo Dala dawa jebe dra nobar jebe ge dharba dan tamje gembe bardu jobra jeba tam jege zo jebe manang gadang nyambe senchen tamje deva dan den dunya dandre nirdu lana me bhayang Dabra zobe janju rinpoche dobar jo dala dhamma jebe dra nobar jebe geng tarba dan tham je gembe baradu jo bar jeba tham jege so jebe manang khada nambe senjen tham je dewa dan den dunya dan nurdu lana me pa yang dabara zobe janju rinpoche tobar jo de sama geki pardu lunga yisum gewala ko mashi pardu lunga yisum gewala ko de dring ne sunte ne ma santa samgi pardu lunga yisum gewala ko son je chodan so je jonam la chanchu bardu dane gyabzu je dage jinsu gebe sonam ge rola pencher sanje drubra jo sanje jodan so ge jonam la chanchu bardu dane gyabzu je dage jinsu gebe sonam ge Drola penche sanje drubra shu sanje chodan suge chonam la chanchu paridu dane kyapsu je dage jinsu gebe sonam ke Drola penche sanje drubra shu Kadan nyambe senjen tamje devadam Dewe gyudan dembar gyurji dungyao dan dungyao gi gyudan drewa gyurji dungyao mebe dewa dame drewa gyurji niring chadan nida drewe tangyam la nebra gyurji Kadan nyambe senchen tamje dewa dan dewe gyudan dembar gyurji Dungyao dang dungyao gi gyudang drewa gyurji dungyao mebe dewa dang mi drewa gyurji niring chadang nidang drewa tangyang la nebra gyurji manang kadang nyambe senchen tamche dewa dang dewe gyudang dembra gyurji dungyao dang dungyao gi Gyudan drava gyurji, dunga mebe dewa dangme drava gyurji. Nirin chada nidan drava danyang la nabra gyurji. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. And by the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind, with as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands. I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom are Buddhas numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the airs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors and praise all of you gone to bliss. With the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense I offer to you conquerors. With excellent garments and best fragrances and sandalwood powder, heaped high as Mount Meru. All wondrous offerings perfectly arranged I offer to you conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you conquerors. With the power of conviction and noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors all the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind. Under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas. Solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi. Oh, you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you may intend to manifest final nirvana. Please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings, whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. Zo jin pu ki chu shi me to chan ri ra len shi ni de gen pa de san je shin tu meng te bu wa ye zhe ge nam da xin la ge wa ri shu gu zu yong zo la me zo nam la jin nang sang sun de shi ni ki chu da lu long ju nang zi yong je la la me chu ge ngo de zhe de zo zhao zo wa dang chu jing shao ba dang ji zi yi rang gu xing so wa ye ge wa chung se dang ye ji sang ba tam je zo be chang ju jing gu gu ru de wa da gi ni re na man da la pra de ja so zem je nam ki samba da lo yi ji zha ji dar wa ji chung dong mon te ba yi chu gi kor lo kor du zo. Ndo jin chang chen de le na ro da ma mi da bo pa de jin den gong ka den sun den so we lo me sho so ju lo ma yi dan chu ke lo so ba den so da jin jin ji lo gen ping bin dong me som len gen dong pe dong so nyong lo gen zong me ge wan do jin chang pa jin den gong pa sha la do do da do sam jin ji lo shi tu jin jin den gen mo pa sa ne gen sen do de do do bra jin ji lo hong mo jin ya jin lo chang song pe ma ge sa dong po la ya sen jo ge ngo de ne pe ma ju ne she ju da kodo kando mampu korke ki jese da do ke jinje la ji she zo zo guru pema se de o me je ki igin boda ne do sun san je gun jing o bo ne ran sen jo gun gun sun pon se ba zo we la me shab la so wa.
This is
So, so what I started this session with, it's part and parcel, I feel, on this chapter on samadhi. Because if we kind of read or receive or listen to these teachings narrowly without remembering the bigger context, then we are not, actually relating to these teachings as all different aspects of the 84,000 aspects that is a single path to awakening. And then when we don't do that, we run the risk of distorting of what is being said. So much of up until this chapter is talking about letting go of distractions. But you have to do that in a skillful way, because it might look like you're letting go of distractions when in fact you are just acting out what the 8 worldly concerns, what they are pulling. So the real distractions that we need to make a resolve to be done with, or to slowly to be done with, as the 8 worldly concerns. 8 worldly concerns that come from like and dislike that comes from the 3 poisons. 3 poisons that comes from, finally, avidya, not knowing. So avidya, not knowing, marikpa in Tibetan, gives rise to the 3 poisons. The 3 poisons, moha, confusion or delusion. Moha in Sanskrit, lobha, greed, attachment. Dosha, hatred, aversion. These 3 poisons, these 3 roots of evil, yes, variously called the 3 poisons, the 3 roots of evil, they interact and they give rise to like and dislike. These likes and dislikes then amplify into the 8 worldly concerns, divided into the 2 columns of likes and dislike. Agreeable, not agreeable, preferable, not preferable. Want, don't want. All pretty absurd, you know. They're absurd because how often, how frequently they drive us crazy. And so the section we've looked at, Shantideva talks about, how much energy we give into serving these likes and dislikes. These likes and these dislikes that are so temporary, so unreliable. So so then at the very end of this first section of chapter 8, he says, if only we use 1/millionth of a part of all the energy we have exhausted for as long as we have been in samsara. If only we just use one millionth of a part of all this energy that we have exhausted in samsara, serving the 8 worldly concerns, if we just use that much, we would be Buddhists now. Furthermore, for me, stanza 83 is pointing out how, in fact, even all the cravings that we have, right? In fact, those cravings are understandable in that they're all due to the fact that we are not Buddhists and we are grabbing desperately something that resembles the freedom of being Buddhist. So then we ignorantly, confusedly think that satisfying these cravings will take us closer to being free, to being able to be good to others. And so even in fact, in a way, right, all the unskillful actions that we have created, in fact, comes from this deep, 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 deep desire to be free and to be able to be good to others. So as practitioners, when we understand this point, this is a subtle point, but important point. When we understand this point, first of all, I think we can begin to not to be so harsh on ourselves when we see that we are quote unquote failing. Then we can also be less judgmental towards others when we see others failing. Now, not being harsh on ourselves and not to judge others, it's a good thing. But again, that's not the only thing, right? If you just stay at the level of, oh, I'm not harsh on myself, yay. Oh, I don't judge others anymore. More or less, yes, you have temporarily solved some problems, but you are still stuck in the confusion of samsara. No, right? Not enough. But without first learning not to be harsh on yourself and judgmental towards others, it's very hard to have the right environment to progress further. So this we need to know. So many stories, right, of skillful teachers using what we call tough love, right? Using tough love when it's necessary to help students, to help trainees, to break through. In some ways, it is no less than what coaches have to do with athletes. But that example can also show us how careful we have to be, because there's also lots of, like in the context of sports, young people being damaged by coaches. So likewise, that's why in many of the teachings, it also says, who you train with matters, because otherwise it can lead to harmful situations. So we will read again stanzas 85 to 88, which we have already covered, because I think this is such a, to me, such a wonderful image. So, revolted by our lust and wanting, let us now rejoice in solitude. In places empty of all conflict and defilement, the peace and stillness of the forest. Happy those intent on others' good, who roam in pleasant places formed of massive stone, refreshed by moonlight sandal-scented beams, by gentle woodland breezes soothed. In caves beneath the trees, in houses left abandoned, may we linger long as we might wish. Relinquishing the pain of guarding our possessions, let us live in freedom, unconfined by cares. To have such liberty unmarred by craving, loosed from every bond and tie, a life of such contentment and such pleasure, even Indra would be pressed to find. Then 89, reflecting in such ways as these upon the excellence of solitude, pacify completely all discursiveness and cultivate the mind of bodhicitta. You could be seeking solitude due to 8 worldly concerns. It cannot be that, because the definition of solitude here is to be left alone by the 8 worldly concerns. Or to leave the 8 worldly concerns alone. Yeah, so Peter's question, last class, helps us clarify. What are we talking about when we talk about solitude? There are external steps that certainly is more helpful to seek solitude. Yes, it does involve, physical solitude to some degree, but physical solitude itself doesn't guarantee the real solitude that is being praised here. And so they tell us a story of a village monk. A village monk, that means, he's a somewhat important person in his little village because he's the main expert, this main spiritual authority, a village lama. Overhearing the importance of... give me 1 second. Sorry, my neighbor came looking for spices to make chai for people that are going to the new space in an hour to work. Anyway, so this village monk, heard some teachings about, the importance and the wonders of solitude and everything, and suddenly was inspired, Then maybe, also things were not going so well in the village, like me looking for a ticket, to fly to Nepal, so he was so inspired, So then he said, I'm going into retreat. I'm going to give everything away. So he started giving everything away, He liquidated, right, all his belongings. Then he went up into the mountains, right, and he said, I'm going into a 3-year retreat, ta-ta, So he went. So for 3 years, nobody saw him, Then 3 years later, he came back into the village, And of course, everybody was anticipating him coming back, missing him and everything. And they all, with katas in hand, he's coming back. And then when he came back, then he said, no, don't do all of this. They're like, why? He said, not successful the last 3 years. And he said, what happened? He says, for the last 3 years, all I meditated on is where all my stuff is. Every time I try to do practice, I'm like, Oh, I wonder, that pot that I used to cook, so and so I gave to, are they taking care of it? Oh, I wonder, that Buddha image, that I did so many practices with that I gave to my disciple. I wonder if he's doing his practice or not. And, he said, for the last 3 years, my body was in solitude. My mind was very busy. Yeah, so, mm, so solitude is not just physical. So we have to remember this. So now, now starting stanza 90. Now it's the 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 meditative concentration that is focused on bodhicitta, the samadhi of bodhicitta. How to cultivate that samadhi. So Kempo Kumpel identifies these stanza 90 to 103 as first addressing, teaching the technique of equalizing self and other. When you think of, I think ordinarily, without insight, without real wisdom, we think, no, I'm not so self-centered. You think, or you think, my care for myself, my like my concern for myself, it's not such a big deal, it's normal, we think it's not, I'm not that, because we usually don't think, I'm so egotistical. And we just think, no, it's not so exaggerated. I'm not so, and even if I am centered on myself, it's reasonable, Yeah, outside the context of, receiving Buddhist teachings, I think on a day-to-day basis, whether we word it that way or not, we think, mm, looking out for me, it's reasonable. And that these teachings are, they're kind of exaggerating. But if you really think about it, right? What exists, right, in this world? We have divided into two categories. One, self. Two, other. Until now, right, it still sounds kind of reasonable. Because when we think of other, we usually think of just one other. In any given situation, right? Just one other. Well, me, you. Yeah, I don't mean like just one specific person, but in most interactions, self, other, So we think the equation is relatively unproblematic. But in reality, what this equation is saying is infinity, one. Yeah, other is infinity minus one, and that one is this one. And right now, whether we admit it or not, we do operate on this terribly, terribly, ridiculously problematic equation that doesn't equal. But we have made it equal. We have made it such that one is more important than infinity minus one. And in this first step, all Shantideva is saying is, can we at least equalize this extremely unequal equation that we have right now? That is, my one is more important than infinity minus one. He says, let's start with the first step. How about infinity minus one is as important as one? Verse 90, strive at first to meditate upon the sameness of yourself and others. In joy and sorrow, all are equal. Thus, be guardian of all as of yourself. This word meditate here has become, the English word at least, I don't know Chinese and Spanish, meditate has become something too passive. Original meaning is better conveyed by the word cultivate, nurture. So cultivate the perception, maybe because it's easier, I think, to fix first the perception. Cultivate the perception, and then deepening it to the feeling of the sameness of yourself and others. And recognizing that in the experience of joy and sorrow, we are all the same. So in response to experiences of joy and sorrow, we use those experiences, right, to enhance, to magnify love and compassion. When we experience happiness and joy, then we generate goodwill, metta, love. When we experience suffering, we generate, we give rise to compassion. That is the suggestion that I gave, about how to actually practice this opening bodhicitta recitation that we do. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky. The words there, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. So, especially when we are in a situation where we find ourselves in conflict with someone else, don't forget to ask, what about their happiness? What about their suffering? All my actions are motivated by, driven by, being concerned about my suffering, being concerned about my happiness. And now recognizing that, more and more recognizing that everybody else, their actions are also motivated by, they are concerned about their happiness and their suffering. So now, just as we instinctively look out for our happiness and our sufferings, although we often, do a bad job in securing our happiness and separating ourselves from our suffering, but recognizing that, now we should guard not just ourselves, that we pledge to guard others as well. Now, of course, right? Footnote, important footnote. We don't like develop this feeling without understanding karma. And one of the important points about Buddha's teachings on karma is you cannot make someone happy. You cannot order someone to be happy. You cannot order someone to be free from suffering. Not possible. So like saying here in verse 90, I shall be a guardian for others, and as much as I'm a guardian for myself. So this is saying like, okay, I should be a good parent, not just to myself, but to others. But also there's skillful parenting and unskillful parenting, right? And skillful parenting has a lot of love and compassion, but also recognizing that your children, they are their own people. They are their own beings. In the end, you cannot make them happy. In the end, you cannot. So the resolve here is not the resolve here is not to like go control people's lives to ensure that they become happy and they become free from suffering. The resolve here is, to have this care that is not just focus on self, but focus on the mutual good of self and other. So in 91, it says, this hand and other limbs are many and distinct. Hands, limbs, but all are one, the body to be kept and guarded. Likewise, different beings in their joys and sorrows are like me, all one in wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. Yeah, so using the analogy of we are all different parts of one same body. And that body is a body that naturally wants happiness, don't want suffering. This pain of mine does not afflict or cause discomfort to another's body, and yet this pain is hard for me to bear. Why? Because I cling and take it for my own. And that's the next verse. So Shantideva is following from 91 that says, basically, we are part and parcel of one body. 91, right? 92, he's saying, now, also given that we are part and parcel of one body, also notice how when pain afflict mind, others are not, don't seem to be affected. And here he is wanting to use this to point out, well, that's because we are too attached, identify too strongly with this body, and therefore, when pain, naturally, this body naturally experiences pain. From a medical biological standpoint, if this body doesn't experience pain, it's actually very dangerous. There are some people, actually, rare, but it happens that their nerve doesn't work properly. They don't experience pain. So they could cut themselves and bleed to death and not notice, or, their hand could be in fire and it's burning away. They don't feel pain. So Shantideva is not asking you, to train to that level. Okay. So, the killing of your nerve so that you don't feel pain. He's talking about something else here, by the way, right? He's talking about due to identifying too strongly with this body. So then when pain turns up, we become more tortured. So he's saying, try to also then use this idea of we are all one body, not just like to, unskillfully increase your pain, but also see how, even though we're one body, when this particular body now have pain, the other members, so to say, of this body don't feel that pain so strongly. But I feel so strongly. He says, why? Because I have taken possession of this too strongly, cling too tightly. So I experience the pain. Then, next verse, and other beings' pain I do not feel, and yet, because I take them for myself, their suffering is mine, and therefore hard to bear. Now here, 93, he is saying, as bodhisattvas, and bodhisattvas who have trained right? To a point of maturity, toughness, now we can skillfully take the suffering of others. Here, taking the suffering of others doesn't mean like literally, oh, you have a toothache, I'll take it from you. Here is a poetic way of saying, put yourself in the other person's shoes. So this is essentially what I was recommending, especially when we are in a situation where we are in conflict with other people, to consider, what about their suffering? What about their difficulties? Yeah, what about their pain? Put yourself in their shoes. As they say, walk a distance in their shoes, and then your heart softens. This is an important counterbalance to too much so-called equanimity. Then you become insensitive to other people's suffering. Yeah? When you do that, you can feel kind of like maybe spiritually very advanced, like you're above it all. But this is not the Bodhisattva way. Here, right? You put yourself in the other person's situation, and temporarily, skillfully, you are not afraid to kind of relate to experience their suffering. Then here, there are two types of suffering. There's the suffering that becomes the cause of more suffering. And then there is the suffering that can serve as a cause for ending suffering. This is the second type of suffering that you should not be afraid to, quote unquote, take, because you're not actually taking. You are putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding their pain, understanding their suffering, and then you can say, oh, Now I understand. So just as now I'm feeling this and I cannot bear this, of course, the other person also cannot bear this. And therefore, that's why the other person is doing what they're doing to the extent of harming me, because they cannot, not because there's some evil person in the end, but it's because they cannot bear that suffering and they know no other way but to lash out at me. So now, with this kind of skillful, quote unquote, taking the other suffering is very different from, right? The kind of like, I don't know, the what we call like the savior complex. Oh, I'm going to take your suffering, I'm a great Bodhisattva. I'm Jesus Christ, I will take all your sins. Yeah. Not making fun of Jesus Christ, making fun of you thinking that you are Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, from a Buddhist perspective, is the Bodhisattva example of, I will suffer in your place. That willingness, that ability is what we want to develop. So here I want to share with you, since many of you come from a Christian context, speaking of Jesus Christ, I want to share with you now 2 passages from the Bible. Actually, one time I was giving a public talk in, I believe this is in Chile. My only time that I was in Chile. Claudia was one of my hosts. A public talk at a university. Then at the end, question and answer. There was one person that was clearly, very devout Christian. And he basically wants to talk about, but without Jesus, there's no hope. So he did not directly say that, but I know where he is going with this. And so he kind of made that statement and want me to respond, Then I said, see, I have some tricks up my sleeve. I know enough, you know. So then I said, oh, yes. I said, yes. I'm sure you are thinking of John 3:16. This quote, John 3:16. I said, can you please share with us, you know, what is John 3:16? Hey, he was a little surprised, you know. So John is one of the four gospels. Yeah, it's like gospel, the gospel according to John. So he said, you know, okay. So this is a very famous one, John 3:16. So it says this. So he said, yes. It says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Yeah? For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. So yeah, he was really surprised, you know, why? You know, I gave him the opportunity, you know, to basically proclaim, you know, which is what, you know, he feels he has to do. Then I said, this is so true, I said, you know. And he was again surprised, you know. Then I said, and can you now please read the first letter of John, also chapter 3, verse 16. So this is another book in the Bible called the first letter of John and the second letter. So John wrote two letters. And there is one called the first John, also 3:16. Of course, that one I know for sure. He has not memorized. And he's like, I said, it's okay. Here, you have a phone, right? Here, Google that and read for us. So what is that quote? That quote is this. This is how we know what love is. So John 3:16 says, right? For God so loved the world. Right? So then here it says, this is how we know what love is. So go ahead and translate. Which is, Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. I said, on this point, Buddhists and Christians are in total agreement. And so this is the Bodhisattva way. Again, back to the Shantideva context. This kind of taking on of suffering is done with understanding. Yeah, so today we are going to stop here. We didn't take a break because I have things to do. As the weeks progress further, just so you know, Saturdays probably we will end earlier. I have things to do. Those of you who are local to the Asheville area, you know we need help, and there are many, many ways to help. You know, many things. So whatever you see, you know, you can do, you know, just do it. You have any doubts, then you can check and say, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? But there are many ways to help. Some of the ways of helping includes, you know, when you know that there are people working there, drop in and say hello. Yesterday, the experience of being there, there's nothing so good as even people just dropping in. Even if physically, you know, you cannot do, your presence there warms the rest of us. Frankly, myself, you know, I'm not a very handy person at all, you know. So all I can do is make coffee, go get milk, bring water, you know, make tea. Ordering lunch for people, having an opinion what people should eat. Yeah, so if you know, want to, like, you know, come and drop off some donuts, or send some donuts, or send some, you know, I'm snacks, you know, I'm sure, you know, that those working there, you know, will feel so loved, you know. Yeah, in the samsaric sense, right? All we want, is to feel loved. Yes, May, you have a comment. May was one of the people who came. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, May. Yes.
Okay, I would just want to just second what you just said, Dr. Lai, because I was there yesterday and I am even less skilled than you, but there was a very nice atmosphere. People had a lot of, there was a lot of good vibes and goodwill going on there, and it felt good to just be there. So if you are local and you're able to stop by, I highly recommend that.
So, see you all Tuesday. And another thing, oh, Joyce, we finally got what you sent. So I'll be sharing that. And so Joyce, sent us a box of goodies. Not food goodies, but just as good to the local Sangha members. So thank you so much. Announcements quickly. Those who are in Guatemala and Mexico, if you want to help us with the expense, we have two members very kindly, Javier in Guatemala and Omar, agreeing that you can send your contributions to them. They will keep track of it, and this will minimize all the international transfer. And PayPal takes a chunk out when you send through PayPal. So if Omar and Javier, if you can share your contact information, then if you're in Malaysia and Singapore, Jasper has agreed to also be that person that you can find ways to. And Jasper, if you can share also your email in the chat, your contact in the chat, that will be very helpful. Yeah, so WhatsApp and email. And then Javier, if you can go ahead and share the wonderful page that you have created for Urban Dharma. There it has, listing out the things that we are asking donations for, and you can, if you want, donate through there. But just to point out, actually donating through there is through PayPal, and often PayPal again takes a chunk out. So also on that webpage, we also say if you can send a check to this address, that's the best way. Then nobody steals a portion of it. I think Jasper might not be there. Let me pull up his contact. Let's see. Or whoever has his email. Let me see if I can find his email. Oh, yes. Oh, there it is. Yes, thank you, Leonard. So that's for Malaysia and Singapore. So this is to... But fundamentally, I always want to, every time I do this, I want to say, first of all, if you have a local Dharma center, make sure you take care of that place. That's your first responsibility. Then you have more. You have more ability to help others, then you help others. Charity starts at home. Don't take for granted your local Dharma center. Changchu sem chorim poche ma ge banam ge gyuchi ge ba nyam ba me ba ya gone gondu Okay, everybody have a good weekend and yeah, have a good night, have a good day. Ta-ta.